Welcome to The Dig on the Huskers Radio Network podcast, featuring Nebraska volleyball assistant coach Jaylen Reyes. Here's your host, Jessica Coody.
Welcome back into another episode of The Dig. I'm Jessica Coody, and we welcome back Jaylen Reyes. But that was a fun one last night.
It was. Thanks for having me.
Well, what was your big takeaways? Coach was saying after the game, wasn't necessarily the prettiest volleyball that you guys played, but you found a way to win and sweep at that.
I think definitely wasn't the prettiest match for us. But when you play these teams, Minnesota's, the Ohio States, the Texas, Florida's, Stanford's, it's not always pretty. It's just, can you find ways to win those tight sets? And we did that 3 times last night. I thought we grinded it out defensively for sure. I felt like the last 3 or 4 matches we've been kind of outscoring teams. But I thought last night we did a really, really good job defensively on some of the key things we talked about doing against Minnesota, who's a really gifted offensive team. And happy we were able to win a couple sets last night. It
was a kind of a game of runs, right? A match of runs. And a couple of those were coming with 3 different people at the service line. I think Harper, Merritt, and Laney. What was it about those rotations that you guys are able to rip off those runs? Because I don't think that was the first time either that you guys have put runs together with those guys on the service line.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and shout out to Coach and Kelly, they've really been working the last week and a half or so. We've really made like an emphasis on serving it tougher. And don't get me wrong, we always work on serving, but the last 10 days, we've really made an emphasis on serving it more aggressive and serving tougher and being more consistent. And those 3 players, for sure, I thought did a really good job of really serving a lot of tough serves into the court and making the other team side out, because we're pretty good defensively. But can we get them off the net a little bit so it's not as easy for them to side out? And I thought Merritt and Harper and Laney, I thought a lot of them did, but I think those 3 for sure, especially at the end of sets, went back then, hit some really difficult serves and made it a little bit harder on Minnesota to side out.
The TV broadcasters were talking about how, you guys had gone up 2-0 on several teams and didn't close the door, and you're able to sweep last night. Is that a conversation you even have, or you just know sometimes teams might get a set here or there, especially the good teams? Is it ever concerning, I guess, that when you go up 2-0 that you're not closing the door, I guess, quote unquote, is what they were saying about, going up 2-0 or whatever? For
sure. I think, one, that's a good problem to have, I guess, if that means you're getting up 2-0, right? So I would start there. I think second of all is the level of coaching, especially in the last 5 or 6 matches we've played. The coaches on the other side are also really good, along with their teams, right? So they're going to make some adjustments. When you go up 2-0 in volleyball, there's a tendency of, hey, what we're doing is working. So let's not change too much, but you also have to understand the other team is going to come out and probably do something that maybe a little bit different, serve it harder, maybe set these players a little less, and maybe set this 1 or 2 players a little more. But that's all guesswork to a degree. And then the game happens, and then especially if you talk about, hey, who's going to get set more or less, that's also just dependent on how they pass the ball and the capabilities of the setter, right? So a little bit of it is just you can overcompensate. As coaches, we can make maybe not enough adjustments because we're up 2-0, or maybe there's sometimes we make too many adjustments. I know the girls, the Huskers, have really like focused in on when we're up 2-0. They have maybe a conversation between themselves in terms of, hey, let's come out and making sure we don't lose any focus. I don't think last night. I'm going to speak on last night specifically. I don't think last night it was a lack of focus. I thought Minnesota came out and played really well early in that 3rd set. They served it really well in a couple of rotations where they gave us some problems. I think they made a few adjustments in terms of their offense that we kind of were ready for, but we didn't fully put the plan into motion. So they had some success early. And then, at the end of the day, too, they have really, really good volleyball players that, the reason they're really good is because, hey, they make some mistakes and they're going to be able to kind of recover too quickly. So I thought last night, I think both coaching staffs would say they didn't play their best matches, whether, us or Minnesota. I'm just happy we were able to kind of grind out some points at the end, because it was kind of we were down a little bit. We kind of crawled back. It was neck and neck. And then I think we made a little run there when it was 21 all, and we scored a couple of points in a row. So happy we were able to kind of grind up some points defensively for sure.
One of the things I wanted to get into with you today is the defense part of it. When you were brought onto this staff, what was that conversation like? Because, I mean, you were already defensive minded. You were coming from the men's game. But what was that conversation like with Coach Cook and hey, we want to be the best defensive team in the country? Yeah,
during the job interview, that was kind of the role, was you'd work with middles and you would be kind of our block and defensive person. My background coming from BYU as a player and as a coach on the men's side, kind of prided ourselves in block and defense. So I'm not going to say it was a seamless transition because I don't think it ever is. But I felt really comfortable, or I guess I convinced Coach I was really comfortable in terms of doing it. When I got here, I think there was different things I had to learn coming from coaching men's volleyball to women's volleyball. Women's volleyball, there's more tactics that are involved, and you can really affect the game, even as a coach, literally putting this player in this specific spot or blocking in this specific spot versus, I mean, if I'm being honest, in men's volleyball sometimes it's about jump serving really hard and you have to side out and kill the ball because there's not as much defense being played just because the game overall is very, very physical compared to the women's game. But at the top level on the women's side, the level we're playing at, you know, there's some pretty physical teams. And I think Coach has probably even told you before, some of the matches we're playing, it feels like a men's volleyball game where it's just, you know, balls being passed, setters set, these big outside hitters or big middles, and everyone's just killing balls left and right. And can you just make those one or two stops that you need to win? And I felt like the last couple of matches we've played, that's kind of how it's felt, where, you know, we're not gonna hold some of these teams to hitting 0, right? We're gonna hold them to high 100s, maybe low 200s, and then can we out hit them? Think of it more like men's volleyball is kind of like a Big 12 football game where you got to win it 65 to 52, you know, versus some other football games where it's 10-3. You know, I would say the higher level games we play, it's going to be more, can we score touchdowns when we get the ball, and then can we get those one or two turnovers you need at the end of the game to win it? That's kind of how the style has to be, just because the game, there's so many good players now, there's so many good teams, there's so many great athletes playing volleyball, that you can kind of see even hitting percentages around the country are going up, and defense is getting harder, you know? So first, can you serve it hard enough? And then, can we just kind of key in on maybe 2 or 3 things that the opposing team likes to do offensively? And can we just try to take those things away and try to just limit some of the best players? Because some of these players we're playing against are the best in the country, and they're hard to stop. I mean, getting them to hit 200 sometimes is a good night defensively.
I love that. I love that comparison with the Big 12 for sure. So when you made the decision to go from men's to women's, why was that? Why did you want to come work for Coach Cook at Nebraska? I mean,
one, you just get to work for a guy that, I mean, is probably, in my opinion, I'm probably obviously a little biased, but the best of all time. Growing up in a volleyball family, my dad was a coach. Just looking up to coaches like John and Russ Rose at Penn State and John Dunning at Stanford, like getting to work for one of those, you know, pillars of volleyball in this country, and NCAA volleyball, I think for me, it was a chance of a lifetime. And then, I mean, coming to Nebraska, it's a volleyball program you shouldn't turn down. Yeah. It's just the opportunities here are endless, and the school, the community, obviously they just put on like the first class event to where, hey, this community and the university absolutely cares about its volleyball program. People that are listening, I don't need to convince them of that, obviously. And then I just think, you know, I hate to make it about this, but there's just more opportunity on the women's side. There's more volleyball schools on the women's side. So being a young male at the time, it was just, hey, you know, if you kind of want a future at this sport, most of the future is going to be on the women's side. So I think the quicker I can get a great or a good job on this side, I told myself I would take it. I think when Nebraska came along and I got offered the job, it was a no-brainer. But yeah, a lot of it was just, you know, I've always been intrigued about this side of the game, and you know, and just I think one of the biggest factors was getting to work for John.
I asked Coach Cook this the other night on his show, but I'd be interested in your take on this. When you're recruiting players, and a lot of times it can be all about offense, right? And how many kills you get. And that's what he's saying when you're talking about stats. It's a lot of times the offensive stats. But when you're recruiting players at a young age, are you looking to see how much they buy into the defensive side of that, or is that something that you coach up once they get here?
A lot of defense is effort, right? I mean, a lot of it is just pure effort, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, Lainey Choboy is very, fundamentally, she's really good. But a lot of the plays she makes is just pure, like, she doesn't want the ball to hit the floor. So I think that's one thing we do look for, especially in floor defenders. Blockers, there's a little more feel, it comes a little more natural, or it depends how it's trained. Sometimes people play for coaches that are able to train it a little bit better than others, if I'm being honest. But I think, yeah, there's definitely more of a feel of that. But, you know, I would say most of the time when you recruit players, we're looking for players that can kill balls, and we can feel like we can coach the defensive side of the thing. But, I mean, part of that, the defensive side, just like what I was talking about floor defenders, is effort and just you take it personal if someone hits it past you. So I think Becca Alex is one of the best blockers in the country. And part of it is she feels like she should block everything. She knows she's not going to, but there's this like drive to like, she takes it personal when you hit it past her. And I think that's something that's just sometimes within kids, and you can kind of see it out when they're playing in high school and clubs. So yeah, definitely we look for that. But obviously there's a huge premium on people that can kill the ball too.
Kelly was saying that even with someone like Bergen, right, you guys teach all kind of the same principles in terms of blocking. What are the three biggest things or the biggest things that you want to teach your blockers and blocking that it leads to the success that you guys have in limiting opponents' hitting percentage? Right.
Having great eye work is important. I guess that's everything in sports, but just making sure in the sequence, and without getting into like all the nuts and bolts of it, I think making sure they're looking at the right things at the appropriate times. Is the pass coming over the net or not? Get a really good look at the setter, because the setter, where she's setting it from, or even her body posture, or is the setter setting the ball from on the net or off the net? Because that helps, gives you kind of ideas of where the ball is going to be set. Like, that's the biggest thing. And then I think just biomechanically, are they moving? Do they have really good block fundamentals in terms of footwork in place and how they use their arms to jump? And are they opening their hips and turning and running? Or when they shuffle, can they really push off their feet and use the ground to jump? So there's a lot that kind of goes into blocking. I think blocking is actually one of the most complex skills, attacking too, and maybe even like running an offense setting. Those are probably the most three in terms of like complex, because there's eye work involved, there's movement patterns, there's different footwork patterns that, you know, you could do it this way and I can do it that way. And as long as we both move efficiently, we can both be really good at doing the same thing, but in a different way. So that for me, that's what makes it complex, is there's not a real right answer. The other thing we kind of talk about is the ball knows angles. So when the ball hits the block, can we get the ball to reflect to where we want it to go? We don't want it to hit our block and go straight down on our side, or we don't want it to go hit our block and go out of bounds on their side. Those that follow volleyball, the ball knows angles. You'll hear it a lot when they talk about passing, when they talk about a serve receive. But we try to kind of make an emphasis on, hey, when we make moves outside of our body, can we create the angles with our arms to bring the ball to where we want it to go? And then for us is just, the other thing is have an understanding of where players like to hit the ball. Great players, even the best players in the world, they hit the ball all over the place. But even the best players have their one or two favorite shots they like to go to when the stress hits, or it's the end of the game, or maybe they don't get the set they like. Everyone has their shot they like to hit. So just getting our blockers to understand at the end of the day, okay, hey, this player can hit it all over the place because she's really good and really talented, but this is where, when it's 23-all, okay, and she gets a good set, this is where she wants to hit the ball. So if we can get our blockers to just understand that and then maybe make reads from that spot, we could be pretty good. And that's kind of something we're trying to achieve.
Oh, fascinating. What about, too, when you have the double block and even just like the timing of the two and then the spacing of it and not allowing the space for it to get through that's something you got to work through too, right?
So that's the other thing in terms of why it's complex is you need two people to be seeing the same things, right? And then you have the dynamic of a middle has to maybe block in the middle on the left and the right. You know, maybe Bergen Riley or Merritt Beeson on the right has to help with quicks that are maybe run on top of them, but also they have to worry about a set out to area 4 or a go set onto the other team's outside hitters. So that's why blocking is really, in my opinion, it's really hard to train because it's super complex and it's two people making a read together and then making sure, you know, doing the things you talked about, closing the seam in the block and making sure they're over the net with timing is important. And the reason why I think it's another reason why it's complex is the ball is on the other side. The other team is dictating when they hit the ball, how fast they set the ball, where do they set the ball, right? So that's why eye work is super important and making sure we could do all the footwork correct, but if we're early or if we're late, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So it's like the timing of, okay, great, awesome, you did the correct footwork and you were in the right spot. But if you're a little early on your way down, that player can probably hit over you still. So there's a lot that goes into blocking, and I think that's why it's definitely a skill that most high school and club players, when they get to this level, have to be refined. And I think it's doing a lot of club and high school coaches are doing a great job of it when they're younger. But when they're younger, in my opinion, there's bigger emphasis on serving, passing, hitting the ball in, because that wins. When you get to the higher levels, like there's a little more emphasis on you have to be able to block a bunch of different areas versus at some of the younger levels, it's like, hey, honestly, if you can serve, pass, dig balls and hit in a lot, you're probably going to win. Okay. But once you kind of get to the higher levels, I think there's a little more of a premium on blocking. But there's still, if you can kill balls and serve and pass, even at our level, you're going to be in most volleyball games and probably win most volleyball games.
Fascinating. Wow. But you guys have found that that's what has separated Nebraska a lot of times is the ability to maybe stop the pass or the serve and the kill is to maybe slow it down a little bit with the defense, right? For
sure. I mean, it definitely helps when, we can get a couple of touches and, maybe make attackers, whether how good they are or not, like feel a little uncomfortable because Nebraska is trying to take away what I like to do the most. But, there's times where we're playing against really good teams that they're going to, for an example, the first set last night, I think Minnesota hit a huge number. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but they hit a big number in the first set. We were able to win that set because we hit a bigger number. So we outscored them. And then I think the rest of the way, it was more of a defensive battle. I don't think in the second and third sets, both coaching staffs would be like, oh, we played beautiful sets offensively. I think we were just able to make a couple of stops in certain areas of those two sets where a couple of stops here or there, and then we were able to turn them for points in transition. I think that was the difference. So for us, it's like, are we able to win both types of volleyball games? The slugfest 10-3 football games, and then can we light up the scoreboard and win the 62-55 football games? I think the teams that have the ability to do both and kind of rely on O and D, just like in any sport, wins, right? So for us, it's like there's a big premium on defense and serving and defense and blocking defense here at Nebraska, but putting more of an emphasis on even being able to, hey, we're going to out-hit this team this set to get this win. Because maybe, hey, they're doing some stuff defensively that maybe we can't pick up yet right now, but we will. But can our offense carry us to win that first set just like last night? And then I thought the second set we came out and we did a really good job in terms of the stuff we were trying to do. Because you just got to get used to these teams. Some of these teams, you talk about them all week, but it's one thing to be out there and playing against a McKenna Wicker, who in my opinion is one of the best outsides in the country, and Taylor Lanfear as well, where, I mean, we line her up and she's going to go over us. And she goes over us a couple times, and it takes a little bit of like, oh, wow, like she really is going over us, and I thought our offense did a good job of kind of carrying us through that first set. And then I thought, the black shorts definitely showed up in 2 and 3.
You mentioned Becca Alec. How much fun is she to coach?
Let's just say this, it ain't boring coaching her. And the reason I really thoroughly enjoy coaching her, because sometimes sometimes I don't enjoy it, but it's like, it's a discussion all the time. I feel like there's a discussion between us, and because she really is really intrigued on the why we want to do stuff. And I feel like because the fact that she's curious, she learns pretty quickly. There's times where I'm like, hey, let's just do it this way. But yeah, there's a lot of things that she does that, I mean, you know, I'm just trying to refine, but she's kind of come in with Nebraska, with, especially if we talk about blocking, like she's very gifted in terms of just has a really good feel of getting her hands where the ball is going to cross the net. And if I had to dumb it up as simple as I can, it's like, can you just get your hands in the way of where the ball is going to cross the net a lot? And Becca has a kind of that knack of being able to do that. And
no short of personality either, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, put it this way. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It ain't boring. She ain't boring.
I love that. I love it. Well, let's talk about this weekend coming up. Purdue on Friday night at their place. So the first Big Ten road trip. What does that look like for you guys in preparing this? Again, I know you're not saying it, but this young team, that a lot of them experiencing this for the first time.
For sure. One, it's going to be, I mean, usually we play there, little small gym. I think it's called Holloway Gymnasium, and it's, Purdue is always very, very well coached. They always have really good athletes, which is not going to change this year. And that environment's awesome. Student section's right on top of us. They show out for home games, and yeah, it's going to be one of those things where we're going to see how they react to. You know, we've played a couple of road matches now. Obviously, we've played in front of some pretty big crowds, but you know, now it's like the getting on the plane, playing. Okay, great. We played a match against Purdue, and then now going down to Bloomington and playing against, honestly, a very, very good Indiana team too. So, and it's been a while since we've played a Friday and then turn around and play on Saturday. So that's going to be kind of a transition as well for us. So part of the reason, Jess, I really enjoy coaching this team too, is because everything is kind of, don't know how they're going to react a little bit to it. And that's what kind of makes it, I guess, a little nerve-wracking, but at the same time, very, very fun.
So I'm sure you started already, and then again, just a team you're familiar with, but diving into the prep for Purdue, what are the keys against a team like Purdue? Well,
very, very gifted offensive team. They're kind of like us. They're on the younger side in some areas. They're I think the two headliners on the team. I shouldn't say this because they actually have a lot of really good offensive players. Eva Hudson was Big Ten Freshman of the Year last year, so she's a very dynamic outside hitter. And then one of the outsides that, in my opinion, is she's always been fun to watch. Watching her play club growing up is a girl named Chloe Chicoine. She's on the outside. She's in terms of Big Ten standards, she's a smaller outside hitter, but a huge arm in terms of being able to hit the ball hard all over the place, a big jump, and just a baller of a competitor. I mean, when we were watching her growing up, that's just the thing that pops out of you is like, wow, this kid is super competitive, and obviously she's a great volleyball player. So being able to handle those two is going to be a load for us. They got Grace Heaney from Elkhorn North playing on the right, so it's kind of weird playing a Nebraskan that's playing for them on the right. She's playing opposite for them, and then they have Raven Colvin, who's she was teammates, I believe, on the national team with Merritt Beeson, Lexi Rodriguez, and Becca Alex. She was the other middle. She's one of their middles, and she's a returner for them. And they do such a good job of training ball control, so they always have a bunch of different DSs and liberos that are really, really talented. So, and I know they're breaking in a freshman setter that I want to say I even coached once when she was growing up on the USA thing. I think her name's Taylor Anderson from San Antonio. So they have some really, really gifted players, and those two left sides are just as good as some of the ones we're going to play against. And they're also just two of the bigger, some of the most competitive kids we're going to play against too. So, usually you're a good team when you have you're a good team when you have one good outside hitter. They have two. So, they're going to be tough to handle, and they're playing two full rotation, 6 rotation outside hitters all the way around. So you're going to see them flying out of the front row and the back row. Chloe Chicoine's got a jump serve just like McKenna Wicker did last night. And, it doesn't get easier for us this week. And then playing in that, it's a unique environment. It's such a cool environment for volleyball at Purdue. And the Shondells do such a good job training. So it's gonna be fun when it's always a fun when we play them.
All right, and then Indiana, you said they're really talented, kind of up and coming, right? Not a lot of people saw them coming.
Up and coming, really good. Steve's done a really good job. I think he's done a really good job recently with his staffs in terms of bringing in coaches that are really high-level volleyball coaches that are training, the recruiting. They have some really good players, a couple from Canada. Steve's from Canada, so he's got a couple of Canadians on the team. He's got a really, really good setter, left-handed setter. They're setting quick from off the net. They're setting it fast. She's got a really good jump serve that most people don't, like, we don't have a lefty in our gym, so seeing a jump serve bend the other way from a passer's right to left is different. That's hard to replicate in your gym. And they have some outside hitters that are very physical. The one thing they do, I'm not sure after the first week of the Big Ten, but I would bet they're up there in terms of aces per set. So they have the green light, like how most people, when you go pass set and you try to kill the ball, they're trying to do that from the service line. Wow. So just like a Stanford, I thought Minnesota did a really good job of like serving tough. Serve receive is going to be a premium against those guys. And then Cam Hayworth, their setter, she's the real deal. All Big Ten first team last year. And I mean, she's setting it fast. She's coming off the net, setting quick, perfect pass. When you think she's going to set the quick, she fires a fast go set out to the outside. So, I mean, they're a handful too. And I really think Steve's got them believing. And, you know, I think they're a tournament team this year, and they haven't been in the tournament for a while. And again, Steve Aird, who's a friend of mine, he's got them believing. You can just tell watching them play, like they're rolling right now. And if we don't go in there with that mindset, you know, we're gonna have a tough time. And I think either way, we're gonna have a tough time with both of these teams this weekend because just like the state of Nebraska, there's a lot of talent in the state of Indiana.
Well, best of luck this weekend. We appreciate your time. Fascinating conversation. Always enjoy talking about it. So appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jess.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dig. Thanks to Jaylen Reyes for spending some time with us. And make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen to never miss an episode.